so excited. Here we go with a real-world function rule problem brought to you within a computer screen because we're graphing it. It's going to be neater that way. We've got a lifeguard at a pool earns $10 for each hour worked. That's the situation. The function or function rule T equals 10H represents how the number of hours worked, H, so H represents the number of hours worked, relates to the total money earned, T. Make a table and graph to illustrate the functions. That's the first thing we need to do. Then it says how much money is earned after 10 hours worked. Basically, just like in a previous video where I showed you we have an input and an output, H is your X value, your input, and Y is going to be T. So here on this graph, I've already labeled the axes. Money earned, right, is going to be your output. That's like your Y value. And then we've got hours worked. That's going to be like your X value. So I'm going to put an H here and a T here. And that's not to freak you out. That's like your Y value and your X value. Now, we're going to determine what the intervals of this graph need to be set to once we draw out the table of values that we need. Now, a couple of things to consider. One is, how do we organize this? Well, I need a table. So I'm going to have my input values that I'm going to plug in, and those input values will be H. I'll have the work that I do, and I'll put that in the column. That'll be T equals 10 times H. And then I've got my T value that I'll get out. And then from there, I've got X, Y values. And this is not to confuse you, but like I said, the X value is H, the Y value is T, which I guess I should keep as capital T there. Okay. So now H comma T is just like, and I'll put a little note there, X comma Y. So let's dive into it. So what H values, what hours do we choose? Well, I used a first quadrant graph here because we're not going to be graphing things with negative H values or negative T values, right? We're making money, so that's a positive Y value or T value, and we're working positive hours or 0 hours, which would be a positive H value. So I'm going to choose numbers like 0 through whatever we want. Now the eventual question says how much money is earned after 10 hours. So I'm thinking let's go up by 2s so that we get to 10. So 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 will be our inputs, keeping in mind that we could have plugged in any positive hourly value there. Then our work says that we should be following the rule 10 times H to get out T. So I'm going to do 10 times my input of 0, and that will get me out a T value of 0, and that's the point 0, 0. Then my next input is going to be 2. So I'll do the rule, which is 10 times 2, which is 20, and that's the point 220. So this is how we're going to end up graphing it on our coordinate plane to the right over there. Plug in 4 right here. 10 times 4 is the rule. 10 times 4 is 40. Not so bad. And that's the point 440. Aw, yeah. And then we've got another point that we're going to get when we plug in 6. So 10 times 6 is 60. 6 comma 60 is our rule. Not our rule, our coordinate pair. Our rule is this. We're going to keep following the rule. 10 times the next hourly amount, which is going to be 8. 10 times 8, which is 80. And so we get the value 8 comma 80 as our coordinate pair. And then last but certainly not least, 10 times 10. Following the rule, the number of hours is 10 times 10 is 100. And so that's going to be the point 10, 100. Remember, H is like your X value, T is like your Y value. So now that I look at these points, that's going to help me determine what my intervals should be on my X and Y axes, or H and T axes. The H values, which are like my X values, go up to 10. And we went up by 2s, so we can certainly go up by 1s. That's not a problem. So every 2, I'll put a number. So we'll have 2 there. I'll have 0 here. I'll put a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10. And there's no reason why we can't fill in the numbers, I guess, in between. It's just that we did not find the values for the numbers in between there. Okay, now on the t-axis, it looks like we went up by 20s here, but again, every block, well, maybe by 10s, that would easily get us up to the highest value that we have here of 100. So I'll go up 10, 20, 30, 40, going up another 10, 50, 60, 70, oh, my handwriting's getting worse, 80, 90, and then finally 100. And we could keep going up higher if we wanted to, and so on and so forth. So we picked those intervals because we knew they would include all the numbers that we got there. Now all that's left is plotting these points. So we'll plot the point 0, 0. I'll do that in a different color here. So the point 0, 0 is right there. Then 2, 20. What this represents is more than a point. It's right 2 up 20, sure, but it represents that 2 hours we made 20 bucks, the lifeguard did. So after 2 hours, the lifeguard made 20 bucks. So you can read a graph the same way you can read the data or the information we get from the table. So rad. 4, 40. That's right 4 up of 40. We got a nice line happening here. 6, 60. That's going to be right 6 up 60. Then we go to 8, 80. So that's right 8 up 80. Beautiful. And finally 10, 100. So that's right 10 up 100. So we get a nice linear function here. We can tell that for every 2 hours worked, that lifeguard's going to make 20 bucks, which makes sense because for every 1 hour then, they would make $10, right? So $20 over 2 hours would be $10 per hour. Working in some rates there. Very cool. It all connects. I'm stoked. Okay, so let's go from here and answer the second question. How much money is earned after 10 hours? 2 ways of answering that. Well, it's on the graph. You go to 10 hours worked, and you go up until you get to the corresponding t value or y value, and we see that happens right here. And so after 10 hours worked, we make $100. So my eyes are literally going out to this point here and working up to that point right there. So after 10 hours, we make 100 bucks. Now there's another way to do that. You could also evaluate and say, well, t is equal to 10 times 10. And we know that because h is the number of hours, so I do 10 in for h times 10 is 100. And that gives me my value just as well. So that's it, folks. That's what we have there as far as graphing a function rule in a real-world problem. It involves slightly different variables. They're all just x's and y's, and you can tell from my voice I am pumped on this.